So welcome everybody to the second in the series of Meet Success. This is a 15-week series, so we've just started, and our guest panelist today is Shiran. So welcome, Shiran.
Hi, Terry. Good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for giving up your time. And we'll return to Shiran in a moment. I've just got a few little housekeeping things to get through first of all. The first one is I want you to have a look at your control panel just to make sure you're aware of how the webinar will function if you haven't attended one before. You have a control panel and you have a box where you can type your questions. Now, every attendee is automatically muted, so you need to post your questions via text and click send or press enter. What will then happen is I'll see your question and I'll try to get to everybody's questions throughout the course of the discussion tonight. And if I don't get to anybody, I can follow up with emails tomorrow, and that's all good. Now, the control panel takes up quite a large part of your screen. If you want to minimize it, you simply, we'll just show you, you simply click on the arrow in the orange rectangle there, and it will minimize, and you'll have a control panel. It's just a toolbar on the right-hand side. Then if you want to open it up again and have your control panel back, you simply click on that and it will expand into the whole open control panel. So that's how that works there. Okay. The other option you have is if you do want to ask a question, what you can do is just indicate by clicking on the hand icon. So your hand will go up, I will see that next to your name, and I can open your microphone, unmute you, and you're allowed to ask a question at that point. If you do that, just make sure that you have your microphone on if you're wearing a headset, or your computer mic is all set up to actually speak. I'll give you a few seconds to do that. If it doesn't work, then I'll just move on and you can go back to texting. Okay, let's keep moving forward. All right, we're going to ask a few questions just to get an idea of who's attending. We have 43 people attending tonight. So I'm going to ask a few questions just to get an idea of who's out there. So the first question is, where are you? Now, if you can just click on the appropriate response for you. So you've got Melbourne, regional Victoria, interstate or overseas. I'll just give you a few minutes. 50%, 60% have voted, 80, a couple of more seconds, then I'll close the poll. Nearly everybody there, 88%, 89. Okay, let's close that off and I'll share that with everybody. And we can see 67% in Melbourne, 22% interstate and 11 overseas. Okay, great. So that gives me an idea of who's intending to come and who's already here. So let's hide that one and let's have a look at the next question. Okay, are you in Australia working in your profession, in Australia not working in your profession, or overseas planning to come? Now, the reason I ask this one is because sometimes people who attend these webinars actually have work already in Australia. They're in their profession, but they might be looking to take a sideways step or advance their career elsewhere. Okay, let's close that one off. Everybody has voted, and I'll share that response. Okay, so 60% not working in your profession but in Australia. That's generally about the right percentage for attendees here. Okay, let's hide that one. One more question before we start off with the discussion. This one is asking you, what is your profession? Are you in banking, finance, accounting, engineering, IT, sciences, or other? Give you a few more seconds to vote on that one. Register your selection. Okay, 80% voted, 90, 92. Okay, 100% voted. Let's close that one off and I'll share the results there. IT is very popular. Okay, so 60% in IT. Now Shiran is, I'll close that one off there. And let's close the polls for the time being. Now Shiran is in customer service, a customer service professional, has a background in banking as well. It's not actually that important what profession the guest panelist is, because everybody's going through a very similar experience, and what we hope to get is a little bit of insight from somebody who's been there and actually achieved success by finding work in their profession. So, Shiran, welcome back.
Hi, Jerry.
Let's get right into it, and let's just give us a bit of a background. What's your job title?
I was previously in banking, Terry, and now currently I've got into a customer service professional role.
Okay. A lot of banking roles these days actually have a large customer service component anyway, don't they?
Yes, it does. I mean, it involves a lot of customer service. And the thing is, of course, I had to be very honest, in Adelaide, banking jobs are quite somewhat challenging to kind of get, but it's not very difficult.
Yep.
Just that you need to know where to look and where to find it, and then who to advertise, etc. So there's a lot of personal marketing that you need to do as well.
Yep.
Because you need to have somewhat experience in working in Australia as well. So there are some challenges in terms of banking customer service jobs, but there are adequate jobs going around here.
Sure. Okay, forgot to mention Shiran is in Adelaide, that's right, and half an hour time zone difference. So tell me a little bit about what you do in your current job on a daily basis.
Yeah, my current job involves talking with customers, dealing with their queries and various matters, resolving queries. There's a lot of cross-selling involved in terms of what we have to offer the client. So that's predominantly my role. It's assisting customers and networking with customers and making their needs special, and then meeting the expectations, and then giving the absolute best service that I could offer. Yeah.
Okay. And when did you come to Australia, Shiran?
I came to Adelaide on the 20th of March of this year.
Okay, so not long. That's just over a month, or 2 months actually. Yeah.
A little over a month, yeah.
And what did you know about Australia before you came?
I've been to Australia a couple of times before I actually moved to Australia on a permanent basis, Terry. So I was in Melbourne for quite some time, so I kind of understood the culture of Australia and what it's about, and it's a pretty nice place to live. So before I actually came here, I did a lot of homework as to what's there on offer, the type of jobs that are available, and what sort of culture it has, what's available. And by doing all that, I got to know a lot about Australia before I actually came. So it's important that you do some homework actually before you decide to move to Australia on a permanent basis. Yeah.
Sure. We'll get more into that in a moment. And
Sure.
Why did you choose Australia as your immigration destination? You've been here before, obviously, but did you have a choice of other options?
I actually did. I looked at possibilities in Canada and parts of Europe because two of my brothers are in the US and one is in London. But Australia is one country that I found to be really, really nice to live in. It had so many positives to offer as opposed to other countries in Canada or Europe or even the Americas. So hence the reason for me to choose Australia as my destination.
Yep. A lot of people cite things like the health system here is quite good, the weather. Were these factors in helping you decide?
Yes, it was. In fact, if you look at the health system, I think Canada and Australia go hand in hand. But between Canada and Australia, one main reason was the weather, because Canada is cold all the time, whereas Australian weather is pretty good. So you have the 4 seasons. But in terms of health, you're right. Australia has an absolutely awesome medical system as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. And you're in Adelaide. You've been in Melbourne. why Adelaide? Adelaide is about, I think, 1.25 million, and Melbourne is almost 5 million. What made you choose Adelaide?
Well, to be very honest, there was, in terms of my visa, I got a nomination from South Australia. So I actually initially I didn't have a choice of moving to South Australia. But at the same time, I never really was choosy about a state. So when I decided to move, I never really was particular about where I moved, because all the states have their own pluses and no challenges really, but more pluses in terms of what it offers. Adelaide is somewhat a little bit laid back as opposed to Melbourne and Sydney, but it's a really awesome place to live. And so, to be extremely honest, I didn't have a choice of which state to move into. Sure. But at the same time, I was not very picky about where I went as well.
Okay. Look, we've got a few other attendees from Adelaide. I know Rochelle is from Adelaide and a couple of others. If you have any specific questions, please post them. So I encourage you to post questions as we go through the conversation, not leave it to the end, and we can always pick an appropriate time to ask the question. Okay, let's move on. And how long did it take for you to find work?
Well, Terry, it didn't take long for me to find work, because as soon as I came in, I started applying, and I was really fortunate. Within a week, I got into a job which is a marketing role, and that was a really good job as well. So although it was more on a temporary basis, but the job itself was a full-time job, but it was not a confirmed job. But it was really good, so I was really lucky in that sense. And then within a couple of weeks, I first applied to other areas, and then my current job came along. So it didn't actually take long. I mean, if you know where to find, if you know where to apply, you can do it within a couple of weeks.
That's, from my experience, it's very quick, Shiran. So
yeah, it's pretty quick. It's pretty quick.
You've done very well there, yeah? And how many interviews did you have before you landed your current job?
I would have probably gone for about 5 interviews until I got this job. Yeah. You have to be a bit persistent.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's about average. So it can take a lot more, and sometimes people are lucky.
Sometimes it can take
Sometimes people are lucky and fluke it on the first one, but that's about average, what you've just explained. So what avenues to employment did you follow? Did you use recruiters? Did you apply directly to companies, or did you just express interest to employers when there were no jobs advertised?
Yeah, I pretty much went through all of those. You have to go to recruiters as well. So I went through websites like Seek, Indeed, Joro. So these are the websites that I looked at. Then also I did a couple of applications of my own, and then hand-delivered them to some of the companies as well. And then those that did not have employment, you just go into their website, and then you go into the expression of interest tab, and then click and put your applications, and then they send you regular updates on what is on offer. So you can do it even with the websites like Seek and Indeed. So if you put your details and just give your email address, practically every day you get 10 jobs coming on each of those websites. So these are basically the avenues you need to look at. The other thing that is not there is you need to look at your personal contacts. Very important. If you have personal contacts in Australia, friends, relatives, family, anyone at all, former colleagues, it really helps. So that's another one that I would put into that list as well.
Sure. Look, I think that's really good advice. You have to hit it from all angles. This is not an exact science. There is no one right way to get a job. And, I think that's really good advice, Shiran. Okay, let's move on. What advice do you have about job seeking in general? You've already mentioned a little about trying those things. Any other general advice or specific advice?
I think it's about attitude, Terry. You need to have the right attitude. And see, for example, if you come from your home country and if you are, say, a senior manager there, and you come out to Australia and you want to get the same type of job role, well, if you do get it, you're really lucky, but you should come with a very open mind to kind of accept what is available. So I think it's all about attitude as well. You can't be pick and choosy when you come to a country like Australia, because sometimes you need to just get your foot in the door. So these are areas that you need to look at as well. So I would say it's all about your personal attitude in terms of how you'd like to get into a job in Australia. So you need to have the right attitude, and if the attitude is there, the rest will just automatically fall into place.
Yeah, okay. Good advice. That first job, and yours, in your case, it was a marketing role, is really critical.
Yeah.
Just getting that on your resume is going to open many, many doors. So that's really good advice.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
We have a question comes from Rochelle, a fellow Adelaidean. For direct applications or expressions of interest, did you follow up on it through maybe emails, or did you resort to calling and speaking to relevant people?
Hi, Rochelle. Yeah, you have to. I did actually both. Initially, what I did was I actually called the company, and they're very, very supportive. So whenever you call them, and you can actually, before you apply, you can find out about the job, what it entails, and what sort of experience levels they're looking for. Because there are some areas that is not really advertised, so you can get an idea of what qualifications, what skills are required. Second thing is, once you put in the application, it's important for you to actually follow up. Usually there are automatic mails coming to your email as to where the application is progressing. So in some cases, they will directly reject you if they feel that you don't qualify. But if you're like on hold, it would be good if you could follow up on the application, because that really helps as well. And then that shows the other party that you have genuine interest, and who knows, I mean, you could land a job that way too. So yeah, to answer your question, you need to do both.
Yeah, good response. It's a very common question that Rochelle asks, because often people are not familiar with what is culturally acceptable, and they think that maybe ringing up is the wrong thing to do. Look, speak to as many people as you can. Okay, you're not going to offend anybody if you are, professional and polite. It's a good thing. You never know what happens with a conversation. It can always, lead to something perhaps unexpected. And particularly, I know Rochelle, who has excellent communication skills. It's really worth talking to people, because that sort of skill, your communication, doesn't come through on paper. People don't know, and they see that you have overseas experience, and they may be suspecting that there are some issues with your English, when in actual fact, nearly every time there is no English and no problem with the English. So it's really good to make that personal contact, either via phone call or face-to-face. Okay, thanks, Rochelle. Next one. Did you have a survival job? So we're talking about, 7-Eleven, factory work, driving a taxi, cleaning, something to keep the food going into your mouth. Did you have to resort to this?
For me, Terry, because I landed my marketing job, I didn't really need to, but just to share some experience of fellow friends that I kind of hang out with, so some of them actually tell me that they had to do survival jobs, like I think the very common survival job that most people do is cleaning here. In addition to that, they work at petrol stations, and some do delivery. So these are pretty good jobs here, although some people may feel they are not, but they're very, very good jobs, and they pay very well as well. And I know a couple of people who have done cleaning and who have actually gone up to start their own businesses, and now they have their own franchises, and they're doing really, really well. So like I said, all this boils down to what I said earlier about attitude, and really what you really want to do, and how you want to be successful in a country like Australia. So it's pretty much about things like that. So
yep.
Well, I didn't need to do one because I got one, but I'm just sharing some experience of some friends that I met who actually told me areas of survival jobs that you need to do to actually get your foot in the door. Yeah.
Sure. Look, the only thing I would add there is it's completely understandable that people need to have money to survive. The only danger is if you start working many, many hours in your survival job and you have no time to look for work, and then that survival job turns into a permanent type job. The longer that goes on and the longer you're away from your profession, the harder it gets. Okay, so just bear in mind, every now and then I meet somebody who comes to my office and by appointment, and they'll say, I'm an engineer, and they'll say, but I've been in the country for 5 years driving a taxi. Now, in that situation, that person is no longer an engineer. All right, so if you are talking about years away from your profession, then it becomes very, very difficult. Okay, let's move on. Is there anything you've learnt in your first year in Australia, in fact your first couple of months? It can be anything about culture, your industry, the country, perhaps something you weren't aware of before you came?
Well, nothing special really, but I can, like certain things like culture of Australia is very important. For example, Australia is very sports driven, so you see many Australians love sports here, especially the footy, the CFL, and then things like football, rugby. So it's a very sports driven country. So that's something you need to kind of adjust to. Then the other thing is the beauty of the country itself. I mean, until you venture out into the Australian wilderness, you really never really see the beauty of the country. So I was fortunate to do that. When I was in Melbourne, I did the Ocean Road and went to places like the 12 Apostles and found it to be really, really good. On top of that, also you need to also kind of learn how people are here. They're very, very nice, very helpful, always supportive. I mean, that's really awesome. So pretty much those are some of the areas that I kind of got into and learned about the country. So it's really, really good.
Yeah. Now, I've been to Sri Lanka and I would have to say there the people are very, very friendly and accommodating and helpful. Is there anything different about the way people interact, say, in Sri Lanka compared to Australia?
I would say no. I think pretty much it's a very friendly culture, and everywhere people are always there to help you, and it's really, really nice. So it's something that I really got used to, and you kind of start liking that when you're here. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Now, you've only been in your role for a short time, but people talk about fitting in. Do you feel like you fit in Australia yet? And if so, why? And if not, why not?
For me, I never really had a problem, but I'm not particularly sure whether anyone would feel that way. But really, there is nothing for you to feel odd about it because Australia is a very diverse country. It's a multicultural society. Cosmopolitan in some sense in most cities. So you have many people from many countries here. So there is really no point in people feel that they need to fit in because I would say no sooner you land in Australia, you automatically fit in. Of course, having said that, you need to know the language a little bit. I mean, you need to know English a little bit. Otherwise, you'll find it very difficult to get around because it's an English-speaking country. But besides that, I mean, there's really nothing that you need to worry about fitting in. As long as you know a little bit about the culture of Australia, and you really don't need to worrying about fitting into the country. It's an automatic thing.
Sure. A question from Roshan, also from Adelaide. Roshan asks, at interviews, did you come up with the question about what local experience you have? Is something that they've come across. How do you handle this? You haven't got local experience.
When you say local, I talk about Australian experience?
Yeah, that's right.
Actually, no. None of the questions related to that. Any of the interviews they didn't. In all the interviews, all they ask you is about whatever job that you have put in. Say, for example, I come from a banking background, so they ask me what I've done in my banking background. That's it. They don't ask you whether you've worked in Australia, what you've done in Australia. So I'm not sure whether it's the norm across, but in my experience, in the 5 interviews I went for, I was not asked that question.
Were they interviews with companies or recruiters?
All companies.
This is the difference.
Directly with the HR.
Okay.
Directly with the HR.
So you've hit the nail on the head here, okay? No local experience is an issue for recruiters. When it comes directly to companies, it's generally not a concern, okay, particularly at the interview. Now, what I say is that if you've been granted an interview and you don't have local experience, it's not an issue for the employer. They're not going to waste an hour of their time talking to you if they think that's a concern. You just don't get an interview. So it's an issue really with recruiters and far less so with employers. Ahmed has a question. How could you build a social network in Australia? This is really important. It's not just all about work. What about socially?
Hi, Ahmed. Ahmed, it's not difficult. If you are an outgoing person and if you are a naturally friendly person with anyone, the Australian culture is such that you can make friends with pretty much anyone. But then I go back to my previous question about whether you have friends and relatives or anyone for that matter, because that might help. Because if you have at least one or two people here, it's important for you to build that rapport with them and get to know them. That will really help you to kind of build up a network. Having said that, if you Google, there are opportunities to join clubs like, I think there are like Rotary, Lions, and there are a lot of social clubs in terms of charity and helping people. So all these are forums that you can kind of get into if you don't have anyone. But it's very, very easy to form a social network here. Initially, if you have anyone here that you already know of, it will help. But if not, just Google in wherever you are, because there are so many social clubs. I'm not talking about drinking clubs, but real social clubs where they help help people out. Yeah, so all that really helps. So you can get into that, and then you automatically create your network immediately.
Yeah, good advice. Okay, look, it's important to state at this point, these are all people's personal experiences. So what Shiran is talking about here is his experience. Everybody will have different experiences, and that's why we interview lots of different people, so we get a variety of views and experiences. So Sanjeev has come up with his point. He disagrees with the fact that local experience is not an issue. He said he got turned down for 2 opportunities this week because of a lack of local experience. Now, I'd actually really love to pick this apart, and this is something we do as part of the OBP Australia service. This has to be explored in more detail. There are several things going on here. One is that sometimes an excuse that an employer or a recruiter gives may not be the complete truth. So they may be using this as an easy way to avoid confrontation or being completely honest with you. The other fact is that what does it mean not to have local experience? Perhaps there are some things associated with that. For example, in the building and construction industry, it is an issue. It means that you don't have an understanding of Australian building codes and standards. Or in accounting, it may mean you don't have an understanding of Australian tax law or corporate law. So it can be an issue in certain professions, and it can be a reason given by employers when there may be some other reasons as well. And I'm not saying it doesn't exist, it does, but we have to pick this apart further. It's probably worth running a whole webinar just on this issue of local experience. Shiran, did you have anything to add to that point about
Yeah, I can touch on one area with regards to local experience now that you brought it up. It did happen to me, but what a lot of my friends actually did was they actually go to TAFE and they qualify themselves because, for example, like you said about building and tax laws and professions like that, they do require you to have certain licensing from Australia. So somebody in that field, for example, may need to qualify themselves in Australia to actually get the required experience and the licensing. So you may need to probably invest some money in TAFE and get those qualifications, because without those qualifications, for example, they will not recruit you. I can just give you one example off the cuff. One is if you want to work in a bar, for example, you need to have something called the RSA certificate, that is the responsible
serving of alcohol.
Serving of alcohol. So you need to have that license, or else you can't work in a bar. So that's just one example. Or if you want to do building, if you've already been a builder in your home country, you can't be a builder here. You have to get the builder's license here. So maybe just to touch on what you said, Terry, yes, you may need to get some qualifications in that sense. So maybe that's an area that you can kind of discuss further at a separate forum.
Yeah, sure. And Sanjeev, I'd like to follow up with that as well if you want to get in touch with me. I'm happy to explore in more detail your specific situation. Yep. Okay, what's been the most difficult aspect of immigration? So far it's all sounded pretty easy for you. You found work quickly. What's been tough? Anything?
Well, originally getting my migration was not easy, Terry, because I needed to get a nomination from Australia, so I had to wait for about a year until my designated nomination actually came up in the website. So that pretty much was the difficult part, and the second, I would say, the challenging one, not difficult, the challenging one was getting through my IELTS, because the tougher when you have less points, you need to get higher marks in IELTS. So that was a bit challenging as well, but pretty much that was it, just those two areas. But other than that, once you get your points and you get your papers in, it's just a process too that you need to follow. Yeah.
Sure. How would you describe the interview process you've experienced? Did you find anything difficult about it?
The interview process itself is very, very good. There are tests that you need to do. You need to be prepared. Each interview will be different. So some interviews require you to do a psychometric test prior to actually being interviewed face-to-face, but they'll actually call you in, and there's some will require to do it over the computer at home on the internet. Some companies will probably call you to the office and do it, and then they'll have a face-to-face interview later on, or maybe just soon after that. But the interview process is not very difficult. The times are specified where you need to go, where you need to come. So as long as you're prepared, you know what you're doing. You need to do a lot of research on the company that you're being called for, as well as a little bit about the position that they are offering. So you need to study all that before you go. So really nothing difficult, as long as you have a computer at home. You need to prepare for the psych. If you are asked to do a psychometric test, it's good if you can prepare yourself in getting that. With that, I would say if you're asking what's difficult, that would be the only area that you will find pretty challenging.
What about some people have trouble with the behavioural questions that can be quite common in Australian interviews? So things like, what would you do? Give me a time where you had conflict with your manager, or tell me about a time where you made a bad decision. How did you rectify it? Things like that. Do you have any of those sorts of questions?
There have been questions raised, and Terry, it's all about honesty is the best policy. You need to be very honest, and how you handled it in your own environment. Because here it's all about giving the details, and then how you handle it, and obviously, I mean, everybody I'm sure who's on this is very successful in their field. So you make your mistakes, you have your challenges that you have met in your own organization and your job profession. So the person who's interviewing you knows that you're a human being. So your behavioral questions are all about honesty. So if you put that across to them, obviously nothing's going to go wrong for you. So
sure.
In terms of behavioral questions, it's not very difficult at all.
Yep.
Just be yourself, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. How would you describe the Australian workplace culture, at least in the jobs you've had, and how does it compare to working in Sri Lanka? So what sort of management style? So we're talking about your relationship with your manager, how formal it is, any other issues in the workplace. How is it different?
Pretty much not very different, Terry. Only thing I can say is that it's very open here, at least the place that I'm currently employed, and even the previous job. It's very open. They encourage you to kind of come up with your ideas. You are given the opportunity to voice your opinion, and then if you have good ideas, to bring it across. And in most companies that I've gone for interviews, pretty much every single person has come from the bottom. In fact, they encourage people to come from the bottom, because then you understand the culture of the company, you understand what sort of job roles are involved in the company. So pretty much those are the only two areas that I feel are a bit different, because but other than that, it's very good. I mean, the workplace, I mean, they have a lot of health safety concerns as to, about the employers' safety, and all those things, of course, quite strict. Other than that, yeah, I wouldn't say there is that much of difference. Yeah.
I think that's a really good point you raise about encouraging you to give your opinion and share your ideas. It's almost an expectation from management here that you contribute, and if there's any feedback that I get from employers that is of a negative nature for some overseas-born professionals, is that they are reluctant to speak up sometimes and express their ideas, and the manager in Australia is often looking for some solutions from people who know what's going on the ground floor. So don't be afraid to come forward, because you'll be respected for it, and this is the way to move forward in your career in Australia. Okay, what do your colleagues talk about at work? Is it all work, or is there a little bit of outside of work conversation?
It's all about outside of work. Of course, you have a little bit of work as well, but most of the time it's about going to a pub for a beer or something and that kind of thing. So it's, like I said, it's really nice working here. So pretty much every Friday people will go to a pub and have a drink, and that's another way of socializing, getting to know people more. You just become part of the team, Terry, and it's really nice. So like I said, I mean, everybody's treated as an equal, and so pretty much you talk about work as well, but it's mostly about anything, you know, sports, what you do on the weekend, that kind of thing.
So having said that, it's really important to be aware of what's going on outside of work, yeah?
Yeah, like I said, everything about sports you need to know, because sports takes a big a big center stage.
So do you support the Adelaide Crows or Port Power? Have you picked a team yet?
I'd rather leave the politics of the sports out at the moment, because I have one side I have Adelaide Crows and one side the other. So no, I haven't really got into a particular team as yet. So, but yeah, probably in time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about sport is it's safe. You can make jokes, you can have fun with it.
I know.
Nobody's going to get really offended. It's not religion, it's
Absolutely.
not politics. You know, it's good fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Dayani has asked a question. Shiran, you seem to have a pretty smooth sailing here. If you
Hi,
don't, Dayani, she's possibly also, I think, from Sri Lanka. If you don't mind asking, what was your banking position in Sri Lanka? She's just sort of looking at your career trajectory and what you did over there.
Back in Sri Lanka, Danny, I was a branch manager. So that was my job role before I left to Australia.
Okay, great. We'll move. You've said a fair bit about the Australian culture. Look, language is not really an issue for you. Did you have any issues with the accent or vocabulary, or was there anything you want to comment on regarding English?
Not really, Terry, because as long as you can speak, I mean, understandable English and you can get your point across, really it's not a big problem at all. But if there are people out there who's finding it challenging to kind of converse in English or understand English, actually TAFE has some really good, awesome courses that you can enroll yourself in, and they're not very expensive. In fact, some of them are actually free, which they do for migrants. So TAFE offers some really cool programs. But no, if you can just basically speak whatever English you've been speaking in your home country, and it's understandable English,
Sure.
no problem at all. The accent may come naturally at some point, because the more you talk, it can come. But some will get it, some will not get it. But no, it's not a barrier at all. No.
Have you had trouble understanding the Australian accent?
Not the accent, but you get a lot of slang which you need to study.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of Australian slang you need. But then it's just outside of work. Within work, it's normal English. But then when you go to a pub, you get some nice slang that you learn, and it's really, really interesting. Some of it is very, very funny and hilarious as well. Yeah. But you can find out. Everything is on Google, so you just put Australian slang and you can study some of them. It's
exactly,
nice, yeah.
Exactly. There's no excuse for being ignorant in the age of the internet, is there?
Absolutely.
So Ahmed has another question. Is there a time to jog or to practice any sports after working hours?
Ahmed, tell you something, you'll have enough time here, because from the country that I come from, pretty much I get up at 5:30 in the morning and I finish work by 7, but I'm out of the office by 8, and by the time I come home it's 9, and it's probably only on the weekends that I have enough time to maybe go to the gym or even spend some time at home with my mom. But here in Australia there's so much of free time if you really know how to manage your time, and gyms are all over the place. You join one gym, for example, Good Life or Jets or something, that membership will give you access to gyms across the country. You're talking about, even if I'm a member of one of the gyms in Adelaide, which automatically makes me a member of gyms in Victoria as well as Brisbane or anywhere else. So you do have a lot of time on your hands as opposed to most places. So yeah, I have enough time on my hands.
Yeah. Tying into that social aspect before that Ahmed raised, gyms are excellent places to meet people, and sporting clubs are great places to meet people and network and build your social networks, which can turn into professional networks as well. Those gyms that you mentioned, I'm pretty sure that most of those will be 24-hour access, the franchise ones.
24/7.
Yeah, so
24/7.
I mean, it's really flexible, and you'd be amazed at how many people are in there late at night, early in the morning, middle of the day. It's really a good place to meet people. Okay, Izaz has a comment, I guess, more than a question. I note workplace culture in Australia. So Izaz has been working here for a few years. Workplace culture in Australia is value-driven. The values generally are mutual respect and learning, collaboration, getting to know each other, supporting colleagues in the face of challenges, etc.
Fully agree with him.
Yeah.
Fully agree. Work ethics are very important, and I fully agree with that statement, Izaz, man. Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. I mean, look, it would vary, I'm sure, depending on the culture of each workplace, but that's a great comment that Izaz has come up with there.
I fully agree with him, yeah.
Yeah. Now, some people, we're talking about names, Shiran. Some people choose to adopt an English name. You haven't, I gather. How do you feel about that? You weren't pressured to, or?
When you say English name, I would say not an English name really, but a name that can probably be easily pronounced here. So I can again give you an example. I had a friend, his name was a bit long and he started with Z, right? So what he did was he shortened it up to Z. So he calls himself Z, like Z-E-E. And then I had another friend whose name was starting with D, and it was a pretty long name as well. So he shortened it up to D. So I would say not English per se, but a name that can be kind of, I'm not telling people to change their names, but if you like, you can, if people here find it difficult to kind of read your name out in full, you can possibly maybe shorten it up, but it's not a must, but it's how you choose it to be. I never changed my name, I guess because mine is not very difficult. But if you feel you have a name that is a bit long and maybe you want to kind of make it a bit easier, you could shorten up a bit, and then, but it's not compulsory or anything like that.
Sure. Okay, we've got about 15 minutes left, so if you have any questions, I encourage you to post them because it will end up fairly shortly. Okay, let's just go back. Okay, one more poll and then we'll have a couple of more questions after that. Okay, so get ready to vote. Now, in customer service, there's a common saying in English. I want you to see if you can finish the saying. So, which of the following is a common English saying? The customer is always right. The customer is usually right. The customer is always annoying. Okay, I think we've got the right one there. Let's have a look. We've got 60, 70, 81, 82, 83% voted. A couple of more seconds. Get your vote in. 86. And I'll close it off. And I'll share that result. And no surprises there. Okay, let's move on. You've already talked a little bit about what you most like about Australia. Let's just move on. You haven't picked a football team yet, and you're about to do that.
Sorry, I can't see you. I think you need to change.
You've lost me, have you?
Still on me.
Oh,
yeah, no, I not lost you, but you're still. Okay, now it's better.
I forgot to hide the poll. There we go. Yeah. So finally, some advice that someone's planning to start a new chapter in their life in Australia. Maybe for the 15% of people who are attending this session who have not yet arrived in Australia. Is there any sort of advice you can give?
Yeah. Hi. This I like you said, it might apply to some of the people who have actually not arrived, but those who have been here, I mean, they would have gone through the same thing as me. Initially coming to Australia, obviously, you will face some challenges, and one of the biggest challenges would be you're leaving your home country, or leaving your family. For those of you who have parents there, you're leaving your parents, friends. So for me, Also, it was difficult when I had to leave my mom, and then, of course, I had a very active social life in Colombo, where I come from, so leaving my friends and my Friday nights and Saturday night meetups with my friends. So you will miss all that for the first couple of weeks or months. Second thing, of course, again, is you're starting a new life in another country. Challenges like jobs and stuff will always be on your head. You'll be a little bit anxious until you land that first job. So if I were to tell you that you're going to have a pretty easy time in the first couple of weeks or the first few months in Australia, I'd be lying. It will be very challenging for sure. But you need to be able to kind of ride out the waves in the first couple of months. And then once you really ride it out and you face these challenges, you'll be really strong, and then you'll just get over that. So your initial start in Australia will be a bit tough. You'll be lucky if you get a good job at the start, then you're good to go. But you will have challenges like missing people and stuff. So the best is to keep yourself involved in activities like go to the gym and keep, not just staying at home.
Sure.
So few challenges that you have, but the rest is all okay for you.
Yeah, and let's just remember that Shiran's experience of finding work is not typical. That's very quickly you found work. Okay, so if you are still looking for work and you've been here for a month or two or even more, this is not unusual. All right, so you have to keep persisting and stay strong and try to stay positive and do those things that Shiran is saying, like getting out of the house. One of the dangers is that people spend all day, every day on the computer on seek.com, and this is not good for you, not good for your mind and where your head is at. It's important to get out of the house and be with people as well. Rochelle has another question. How did you tap into the jobs not advertised, or were all of your interviews based on existing vacancies?
Hi, Rochelle, once again. No, Rochelle, actually, if you look at the job market, it's like the iceberg. What is advertised is only about 20 is what you see at the top of the iceberg. So 80% of the jobs that are not really advertised, because this is I found out later, is because it's very expensive for companies to actually advertise, and for most companies it's very, very expensive to advertise and get people, especially through Seek and websites like that. So most of the jobs are not advertised, so you need to actually put in expressions of interest if you have. And the other thing I'll advise is get your CVs printed, take a day off if you're working, or if you're not working, just get into a car and just drive around. Go to the places that you'd like to kind of apply, and just personally hand in a CV. But nothing can go wrong. The only thing that can happen is they'll call you for an interview. That's it. But that's something that you need to do as well. In addition to work like that, there's another area that you can look at, and that is as an independent contractor. This is predominantly where you get yourself an Australian business number, and you can work on commission until you actually get something going. So that's another area you can look at. There are a lot of companies actually where they hire independent contractors. You will not get a base pay, but from whatever sales you do, from whatever business you generate, there will be a commission added on. So that's also experience which you can kind of use to get yourself elevated to a permanent job position. So these are some areas that you can look at as well.
I think your suggestion of actually going in person, physically taking your CV in printed and approaching people is excellent. I mean, one, because it's not common. People tend not to do it. So when somebody does it, the employer can often have a lot of respect for you and the courage shown to actually go face-to-face and meet somebody. And if you look good and you're presentable and you have great English, it's really a no-brainer. You should be doing this. So for anybody who's in that situation, that's great advice. Just on the consultant and getting your own business number, ABN, you can also get employment that way. Many companies are employing people, paying them a salary, not commission, but also a proper salary, but you're not an employee. It's a sort of it's a new mode of employment that's sort of become quite popular in the last 5 years. So you may be actually asked to be a consultant when you think you're applying for a job. This can happen as well. They'll say, do you have an ABN number? And they actually want to employ you as a consultant, not as an employee. Ahmed, another question. What are the common subjects that are interesting to talk about with people as a way of building relationships?
Well, pretty much anything, Ahmed. You can start off with, again, it depends on the type of rapport that you have with the person that you're talking to. So if that person is a bit of a sports-driven person, then you can talk about sports. I would leave politics, religion, and stuff out of the conversation, because I would say don't get into areas like that, because probably where I come from, we talk a lot about politics, but when I came to Australia, that's one subject I just came up, because I don't talk about politics and religion and stuff, because those are not important in a country like Australia. It's all about how is the weather, how was your weekend, how's your family, because Australia is a very family-driven country as well. How the kids doing, how the grandkids doing, how's work, are you enjoying work, what are your plans for the long holidays, or the country, sports, things like that. So you can start up general conversations, but I would say leave out things like politics and religion and stuff like that out of the conversation. Don't bring those in. But pretty much any other thing, you can just start up a conversation, and like I said, people are very friendly, and you just need to just open the conversation and the rest will just automatically flow.
Yep. Monica has asked a question. Can you explain a little bit more about going to offices and handing in your resume?
Hi, Monica. Monica, it's of course when you say just walk into offices, I'm not just talking about just walking in going to a shop or something. You need to be well dressed. For example, like in corporate attire, I would say for a guy, wear a suit, look very professional. Prepare a nice CV, and then go and say, for example, if you're walking into a big shop or a big company, ask the reception, look, I'm here for this kind of thing. So I got this background, and I'd like to meet somebody in your HR department. And if you're lucky enough to get an appointment immediately, they will probably refer you to somebody, or at least a junior person who can hand in the application. If not, you could ask them whether I could leave that application with you, and they will escalate it. So look professional and go in and ask for anyone. It doesn't really matter. Like I said, no, you'll never get turned away. The most that can happen is they'll tell you, look, we have a system in place where we don't accept personal applications, but you need to come through Seek or you need to come through Indeed. In a situation like that, you need to follow the formal process, but it will not happen all the time. 99% of the time, if they will take your application, and the best that could happen is you'll get called for an interview. The worst is they'll say, look, we are not interested. That's it. So.
Yep. That's good advice. And Monica, as being a client of OBP Australia, we can talk in more detail about strategies for doing that. There are a few other things you can do to make it a little bit easier on your part. For example, it's not that hard to find a manager's name, and we can look at that. And if you go in and you can ask to speak to somebody, if you have a name, sometimes that gives you a little bit more, an extra power in the conversation that can be helpful as well. There are lots of things you can do, but as Shiran said, it does take a bit of courage, and you do it as if you're approaching an interview. That's great advice. Alex has a really good question. Alex has asked, Shiran, after being a branch manager in Sri Lanka, you were applying for lower level positions. Did they ever tell you that you were overqualified for these positions?
Hi, Alex. Alex, this is where probably Terry can help you out. So because each particular job role, you'll need to do your CV in a different way. So I think depending on the type of job role that you apply for, you'll need to kind of talk with probably, since you're consulting Terry, and redo your CV and the covering letter to suit that particular role. So you need to put in your experience levels relating to the job. So like you don't do about a 5-page CV over here. You need to kind of tailor it to the kind of job role that you're applying for. So it's pretty much it. And like I said, I got my master's here, so I just put my qualifications. It's not really a factor that's going to affect you. So it's how you prepare your CV, and what you put on that CV is what they're going to read. And I would say experience levels in terms of the job role required, whether it's in Australian experience or your previous job's experience back in your home country, it doesn't really matter, but that's what really they will look at. So
sure.
Pretty much it, yeah.
Yep. We're nearly just about out of time. We've got time for a couple more questions if people want to post them. Izaz has another comment. I think someone planning to start a new chapter in Australia should be prepared for volunteering roles or unpaid placement. OBP can facilitate an unpaid placement. That's an option. These volunteers are well looked after and sometimes jobs are created for them. Yeah, great advice, Izaz. Question from Abdul. Contacting recruiters for jobs really works in Australia? That's a question mark. So I'm guessing Abdul is questioning whether that's a useful approach.
Like I said earlier, Abdul, you need to look at all your avenues because you can't pick and choose, because when you come to a country like Australia, you need to look at all your options because it's a new place of work for you. So you need to kind of go through every single opportunity and every single option that's available in the market. And if you look at the laws of averages, if you say put in 50 applications, you're bound to land a job somewhere, or at least 10 interviews. So if you do 10 interviews, you're bound to get at least one job. So you need to look at, I would encourage look at all the possible options that are available. Don't kind of limit yourself to opportunities. Look at every single thing that's available, and it will go right for you.
Yeah, just to add to that, there's one rule that I live by. If something is not working, stop doing it. Okay? So often people come to me, for example, I met somebody this morning who said, I've applied for 200 jobs and I haven't got a single interview. Okay? Now, I can guarantee if that person applies for another 200, they won't get another interview. So something is wrong. Let's stop doing it. Let's refocus, work out what you need to do to get the interview. Okay? If you're getting interviews, your CV is fine. It's working. Okay? It could be better, but it's working. So there are some things that you need to stop and say, look, is this the best way? If recruiters are not getting you interviews, you've got to do more. It's simply not enough just to complain that recruiters don't help. Do something else. Try another method, and there are plenty of options that you have apart from recruiting if that's not working for you. A follow-up question. Is it recommended to offer employers to work without paying until you prove yourself? Can I start with this one, Shiran, because there are some legal issues here.
Go ahead, Ted. I think you're better suited to answer that question here.
If you're going to go down this path, it has to be done formally, it has to be done with insurance, and it has to be organised properly. So there's no room for going to somebody and saying, can I work for you for nothing? One, the employer will be unlikely to take you on the premises without insurance. In Australia, if you are an employee, you are automatically covered for insurance under state government insurance. If you're not on the payroll, you're not protected. Okay, so if you have an accident, it's an issue for you and the employer. So if you're going to go down this path, I suggest you opt for a formal arrangement for an unpaid work placement, which can be facilitated through OBP Australia. And it can be a way of proving yourself, but it's formalised, so it's completely legal, and the employer has no concerns about issues. Did you want to add anything there, Shiran, just before we actually finish up?
No, Terry, you're spot on.
Okay, let's just zip through. We did have quite a lot of questions about what your job is like. You've answered some of those. Can you just tell me what you wear at your work? What are you expected to wear? You said the interviews, it's good to wear a suit for a male. What do you wear when you're actually in the workplace?
You have to wear professional, Terry, because even for an interview, my advice to anyone who's still not found a job and who's actually going for interviews, please invest in some money. Stuff like that, because it's good to have a...
I'm just losing you there, Shiran. Can you check your audio?
Yeah, how is it now?
That's better, yep.
All right. No, what I'm saying is invest in some infrastructure like a computer, a good suit, things like that, because first impressions really count. And in any interview you go, please wear a suit and go. I would advise anyone to do that. because even in the corporate environment where I work, people come fully dressed up, and of course there are dress downs, like every Friday is a dress down day where you can come in jeans and something a little loose, but generally corporate attire is respected, and I would advise anyone to get into a suit if they already don't have one. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We've come to the end of the session. So thank you everybody for joining, having a chat with Shiran. Next week we have the third in the series, and we'll be meeting Sunita, who's a civil engineer currently working in Melbourne, and also a client of OBP Australia. And so I'd just like to take this last opportunity to thank Shiran for giving up his time, and I wish you all the best, Shiran, and sleep well.
Thank you very much. Okay, see you around, Terry.
Okay, bye-bye, everybody. Oh, just before I go, this is recorded, so this will be available on the internet tomorrow. I will send you a link, and you'll get access to this, and yeah, you can tell other people about the webinars or OBP Australia. Happy to have a chat to anybody if you want to give me an email, and we can follow up with that. And talk soon. Bye for now.